In the name of God, who was and is to come. Amen. From this morning's gospel, Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph from Nazareth." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" I grew up in a small village in upstate New York called Ilion. It's nestled in the Mohawk River Valley, about 13 miles east of Utica. There are 4 little towns right in a row: Frankfort, Ilion, Mohawk, and Herkimer. When you drive from one village into the next village, you'd never know you were leaving one and entering another, except for the signs about the parking regulations and the usual ones about the churches and service clubs. These towns are all little places. Ilion is the biggest, with a population of about 8,000 people. Mohawk is the smallest, with less than 3,000 residents. When I was growing up, each village had its own mayor, its own water department, its own Rotary and Kiwanis clubs, and its own school district. It would have made much more sense if the villages and the schools had shared services, but that couldn't even be discussed back in the 1960s because of the rivalries among the towns, and especially among the rivalries in the school districts. That made it impossible. Students from the different schools called each other names. Herkimer kids were pizza pushers, Frankfort kids were spaghetti benders, and we Ilion kids were cake eaters. The rivalries were intense. When our school buses that carried the teams and the cheerleaders and the marching bands left after football games, they would leave in a hail of eggs. If a group of guys from one village showed up at a high school dance at another village, they weren't there to dance. They were looking for trouble. And God helped the person who decided that it was okay to date someone from one of the other high schools. So when we come to this morning's passage from St. John's Gospel, where Philip tells Nathanael that he's discovered the Messiah and that the Messiah is from Nazareth, and then Nathanael looks at Philip and says to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" I can completely relate. It would be like someone telling someone from Ilion that the Messiah was from Herkimer, New York. Nathanael finds it impossible to believe that anything good can come out of Nazareth. It's one of the best examples of prejudice in all of the Bible. Prejudice, a word that means to judge someone else in advance. Every one of us is prejudiced. We judge people in advance based upon where they're from, where they went to school, what clothes they wear, who they voted for, their sexual orientation or preferred pronouns, or the color of their skin. We size people up, and we decide whether they are members of our own tribe or members of some other tribe. Evolutionary biologists tell us that prejudice is hardwired into the human brain as an adaptive response that protected our prehistoric ancestors from danger. That's the scientific explanation, but it's not an excuse for the prejudices we may hold now. A simpler reason for prejudice is that it takes work not to judge people in advance who are different from us. It takes more time and effort to get to know people who are not like us. That's not an accusation. It's a simple statement of fact. Many of us in this congregation have worked very hard to recognize and to overcome our own prejudices and the prejudices of others. A number of us have been victims of prejudice. Following the dramatic setbacks at the Episcopal Church's General Convention in 2006 about human sexuality, All Saints led the way in advocating for the full inclusion of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender Christians in the Episcopal Church. We helped found the Chicago Consultation, and we gave it leadership. The leadership of this parish now has stated clearly that our goal is to become an anti-racist congregation. Those of us who are white have read, gone to classes, participated in trainings, and started to deal with the reality of our white privilege. In spite of these highly commendable efforts, All Saints still has a long way to go. The work to overcome our prejudices and our inherent biases never ends. We are all in it for the long haul. I doubt that anyone listening to this sermon would be surprised to hear me say this. Like many of you, I watched last week when throngs of insurrectionists, amped up by a sitting president's exhortations to the crowd at a Save America rally, stormed the United States Capitol building. The mob looted, destroyed property, and succeeded for several hours in interrupting the certification of President-elect Joe Biden's victory. Since then, I've been reading everything I can about what happened, listening to as many reports as I can, studying commentaries and op-eds in the aftermath. I've also watched politicians who either enabled these events or supported the lies about the elections being stolen now condemn what happened. Whether their conversions were sincere or convenient, only time will tell. The Bishop of Atlanta, Rob Wright, observed, and I quote, that some who have enabled inflammatory rhetoric for professional gain now uncharacteristically call for restraint and calm. But, he went on, you cannot be an arsonist for years and then say that you are suddenly a firefighter. A number of politicians and commentators expressed shock that the attack on Congress had happened at all. They had evidently forgotten how much the spoken word matters. When the joint session of Congress that certified the election results finally concluded around 4 o'clock in the morning on January 7th, the Senate chaplain, Barry Black, prayed a prayer in which he recognized the power of words. He said, "These tragedies have reminded us that words matter, and that the power of life and death is in the tongue." When he said this, he was quoting directly from the book of Proverbs, the 18th chapter, where it says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits." There were those senators and members of the House who, in spite of the attack, failed to experience any kind of conversion or change of heart at all. 6 of them were Senators Cruz, Hawley, Hyde-Smith, Marshall, Kennedy, and Tuberville. 147 members of the House of Representatives, too many for me to mention by name in this sermon, objected to the elections being certified. Their names are a matter of public record. A consistent theme among those commenting on the attack on the Capitol has been the comparison between the police response to the rioters on January 6th and the police response to the largely peaceful Black Lives Matter demonstrators this past summer. Many media outlets posted images side by side of the response to the crowds that formed following the murder of George Floyd and the ones that gathered at the Capitol on January 6th. I don't know if All Saints' technical department is able to show these, but the difference between the photos speaks volumes about prejudice and white privilege. The prejudices of those who planned the response to the demonstrations in June and then again for the security of the Capitol on January 6th is crystal clear. They believed that blacks and people of color were going to be violent, while the predominantly white crowd would not be violent. Here is a picture of the Lincoln Memorial on June 2nd, 2020. And here is the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. The Black Lives Matter Global Network said it was one more example of the hypocrisy of our country's law enforcement response to protest. When black people protest for our lives, they said, we are all too often met by National Guard troops or police equipped with assault rifles, shields, tear gas, and battle helmets. Make no mistake, the group went on, if the protesters were black, we would have been tear gassed, battered, and perhaps shot. The New York Times columnist, David Brooks, who is white, wrote this: "The rampage reminded us that if black people had done this, the hallways would be red with their blood." And one of the most frequently retweeted statements about the differences in the responses put it succinctly: "We're not asking you to shoot them the way you shoot us. We're asking you not to shoot us like you don't shoot them." I suspect that I am like many of you since the Capitol was attacked. I am worried and fearful. Anyone who thinks that what happened on January 6th was a one-time incident is a poor student of American history. To quote David Brooks again, "Human beings exist at moral dimensions both too lofty and more savage than the contemporary American mind normally considers. The mob that invaded the building on Wednesday exposed the abyss. This week wasn't just an atrocity, it was a glimpse into an atavistic nativism that always threatens to grip the American soul." And Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, said, "We fully expect that this violence could actually get worse before it gets better." In the midst of my own worry and fear, I've been searching for hope. I admit that it's been hard to find. However, there have been 3 glimpses of hope that have helped sustain me during this dark time. The first has been the result of the 2 Georgia Senate elections. This is not a partisan statement, and please don't take it that way. It's a statement about the power of community organizing to create change in the midst of oppression. Given Georgia's long history of bigotry, racial violence, and voter suppression among blacks, it should give us all hope that a 33-year-old son of Jewish immigrants and a 51-year-old Black Baptist preacher were both elected to the Senate from that state. It should be noted that the Reverend Raphael Warnock has personal experience of what happens to blacks when they protest in the Capitol. He was arrested immediately when, in response to proposed cuts in the Affordable Care Act, he staged a prayer protest there in 2017. The second glimpse of hope comes from a different image from the aftermath of the assault on the Capitol. It is an image of Representative Andy Kim of New Jersey down on one knee, stuffing trash into a plastic garbage bag. Representative Kim is the son of Korean immigrants, a graduate of the University of Chicago, and a Rhodes Scholar. He walked amid the mess of water bottles, clothing, Trump flags, even a U.S. flag littering the floor inside the Capitol shortly after voting to certify Joe Biden's victory. And he felt the weight of the day bearing on him when something motivated him to clean up the debris. When asked why he did it, he said, "When you see something you love that's broken, you want to fix it." It really broke my heart, and I just felt compelled to do something. What else could I do? His words need to be emblazoned somewhere, bound as a sign on our hands and fixed as emblems on our forehead to inspire us all to service. When we see something we love that's broken, we need to fix it. And the final glimpse of hope is in the image of beloved community that our presiding Bishop Michael Curry has been relentlessly preaching about since his installation. Following the assault on democracy last week, he offered a stark choice between further chaos and beloved community. He said, "In the moment of a national crisis, a moment of great danger, a people must decide, who shall we be? I want to submit that the way of love that leads to beloved community is the only way of hope for humanity. Consider the alternative," he went on. "The alternative is chaos, not community. The alternative is the abyss of anarchy, of chaos, of hatred, of bigotry, of violence. And that alternative is unthinkable. We have seen nightmarish visions of that alternative." Dear friends, the mission of God revealed in Jesus of Nazareth is now more important than ever. During this Epiphany season, God is calling us to rededicate ourselves to that mission, living it out fully in our own lives and in the common life we share here at All Saints. May it be so. Amen.